Hello and welcome. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for today's explainer. We're going to be exploring one of America's most iconic, recognizable, and, honestly, deeply symbolic structures, the Statue of Liberty. But before we get into the familiar story, did you know that a monument very much like this was originally pitched for the Suez Canal in Egypt? Yeah, it's true. The sculptor initially envisioned this giant structure of an Egyptian peasant woman holding a lantern to serve as a lighthouse. Well, when that project fell through, the concept was totally reimagined, eventually becoming the symbol of New York Harbor. Today, we aren't just going to look at the copper and the steel. We're diving into the specific historical elements, the incredible engineering, and the shifting narratives that literally elevated this structure from a simple physical object into a profound beacon of global hope. I absolutely love unpacking topics like this, because we get to see how history, scale, and symbolism all interlock perfectly. So if you're ready to explore how a towering figure captures the imagination of the whole world, let's get started. Okay, so let's dive right into this by asking a foundational question. And it's one I really want you to genuinely ponder for a second. What exactly makes a monument global? I mean, humanity has built massive physical structures, towering pyramids, sweeping walls, statues, all over the planet since the dawn of civilization. Yet only a very, very select few managed to cross that invisible threshold, right? Transforming from just a localized point of interest into a universally recognized, worldwide concept. How does a combination of raw materials just sitting in a harbor somehow manage to speak to people across entirely different continents and cultures? Well, it's because monuments are not just material. They are physical vessels for human ideas. So keep that question in the back of your mind as we begin to piece this incredible puzzle together.
Now, before we can really understand its international reach, we have to look at how it's perceived right at home. The Statue of Liberty is, arguably, America's most famous landmark. It's deeply rooted in the American identity and the American landscape. When people around the world picture the United States, this is very often the absolute first image that comes to their minds. It's the quintessential American postcard, a defining feature of the nation's iconography. But to truly understand this monument, we have to look at this fame not as the whole story, but really just as the first layer. Landmarks often become so ubiquitous in our daily lives that we completely forget their origin stories. So we need to peel back that top layer of domestic fame to reveal an incredibly rich, complex international history sitting right beneath the surface.
That international story officially kicks off in 1886. The Statue of Liberty wasn't just built in isolation on American soil. It was, in fact, a magnificent gift from France. But the reasoning behind it is super fascinating. A French political thinker named Édouard René de la Bouille proposed the monument to honor the United States centennial. But actually, his real motive was to inspire the French people toward their own enduring democracy during a time of major political upheaval in France. And the delivery of this gift? It was an absolute marvel. It didn't just pop up overnight. It was shipped across the turbulent Atlantic Ocean in 350 individual pieces, packed super tightly into 214 massive wooden crates. Just imagine the monumental logistics, the diplomacy, and the profound gesture of friendship required to piece together this colossal puzzle back in the late 19th century.
To really wrap your head around the magnitude of this gift, you have to picture its sheer physical presence. 300! That's how many feet this colossal monument towers into the sky when you include its massive pedestal. But here's where the story gets really fascinating from an engineering perspective. I mean, how do you keep 300 feet of copper standing upright against the brutal, punishing winds of New York Harbor? While you bring in an absolute genius. The statue's sculptor, Frederick August Bartholdi, enlisted the help of Gustave Eiffel. Yep, the exact same guy who'd go on to build the Eiffel Tower. Eiffel designed this brilliant, flexible iron inner skeleton that acts kind of like a spine, allowing the statue's outer copper skin to move and sway safely in the wind without cracking. It's a colossal gift not just in its sentiment, but in its absolute, staggering engineering reality. Oh, and fun fact, that copper actually used to be the shiny color of a new penny before decades of oxidation gave it that famous green patina we all know today.
But, the statue's meaning hasn't just remained frozen in 1886. The reason it actively welcomes millions of visitors every single year has literally everything to do with its geography. Standing out there in New York Harbor, it evolved into a living monument specifically because it was the very first thing millions of immigrants saw when arriving in America via Ellis Island. After weeks on grueling, sometimes dangerous ocean voyages, Lady Liberty wasn't just a statue. It was the finish line of a harrowing journey and the starting line of a brand new life. In fact, Emma Lazarus's famous poem, the one with those iconic lines, "Give me your tired, your poor," that wasn't even part of the original design. It was added to the pedestal later, permanently shifting the statue's identity from a strict monument of republicanism into an enduring, global beacon of welcome.
To truly understand this monument's impact, we actually have to look all the way up to its highest point, the torch. Today, it's fundamentally recognized as a symbol of freedom and hope right around the world. But just like the statue itself, the torch has its own fascinating evolution of meaning. Originally, it was meant to symbolize the light of reason, which is a very Enlightenment-era concept where logic, law, and liberty illuminate the world. However, over time, and filtered through those countless immigrant experiences we were just talking about, it naturally evolved into something much warmer. It became a beacon of welcoming hope. This is exactly how a physical object transforms into an abstract beacon. When people gaze up at that torch, they aren't just seeing 19th century metal, they are connecting with a deeply human sentiment that has really only grown stronger with time.
Freedom and hope. These are the universal ideals where the monument completely transcends its physical location. Yes, it stands physically on American soil, but conceptually, it belongs to the world, and we have concrete historical proof of this incredible global impact. For example, during the massive pro-democracy protests in Beijing's Tiananmen Square back in 1989, student protesters actually constructed the Goddess of Democracy. This towering 30-foot papier-mâché statue was heavily and deliberately inspired by Lady Liberty. That moment proves that the concepts of freedom and hope radiating from this specific landmark have successfully crossed oceans, penetrated borders, and captured the imagination of people seeking liberty entirely outside of the American context. Because at the end of the day, freedom and hope are human aspirations that know absolutely no borders.
Which brings us to the ultimate takeaway of our explainer today. We've traced its incredible journey from 350 copper pieces packed tightly in wooden crates to a brilliant engineering marvel that sways in the harbor winds, and finally to a globally recognized symbol that has inspired democratic movements all across the world. But remember, symbols are only as powerful as the meaning we continue to give them. So I want to leave you with a provocative question to really reflect on. Where does the beacon of hope shine for you today? As you go about your week, I highly encourage you to think about how this timeless symbol of freedom connects to your own personal understanding of hope in the modern world. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible landmark. Keep learning, keep questioning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.